The Monday Deep Dive that's going to kick off week 2 of our TDR 50. This week we're going to dive into the Lone Star State. To paraphrase that old saying, everything's bigger in Texas, including the political personalities.
Men want to be part of a common enterprise, a cause greater than themselves.
Read my lips.
If you give us a chance, we can perform. After all, Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did. She just did it backwards and in high heels.
I just love the fact that everybody, particularly in the media, goes bonkers over the town hall. I guess it's because you will lose your right to tell them what to think. The point is, they'll get to decide what to think.
Hey, you got something there.
Tonight, the state of our union is strong, and together we will make it stronger.
Well, let me just ask you, are you better off today than you were $4 trillion ago?
That's just of the modern era here. From Sam Houston to Ted Cruz, it seems that Texas has had more than its share of notable politicians making national headlines. And for good reason. It's one of the most politically consequential states in the nation. Following the Civil War, Texas went for the Democrats in nearly every single presidential election between 1872 and 1976. Hoover, Eisenhower, and Nixon were the only Republicans to win the state in that time period. The state was run by conservative white Democrats. But as the Democratic Party moved to the left, the Republican Party became home for the state's more social conservatives. By 1980, the shift was complete, and the state had sided with the Republican presidential candidate in every election since. We mentioned that the state's red streak began back in 1980. One common denominator between 1980 and 2004. A Bush was on the ballot in every presidential election except one, 96. Today, Texas is one of nearly 24 states where one party controls all 3 branches of government, the governor's mansion, the state senate, and the state house as well. One note, while the state has been reliably red over the last few decades, it does have an interesting independent streak of sorts. 2 of the most notable independents to run for president over the last 20-odd years, Ron Paul and Ross Perot, both from Texas. Over the last 3+ decades, Texas has grown both in size and in political importance. Back in 1980, Texas had just 26 electoral votes, the same number as Illinois, and 1 fewer than Pennsylvania that year. By the election of 2012, it was all the way up to 38. Only California has more, with 55. That's because the Lone Star State continues to expand at an astounding rate. Back in the middle of the 20th century, Texas was adding about 1 million people every 7 years or so. The rate has doubled in recent years. Texas added 1.3 million people in the past 3 years alone. That's the equivalent of an entire city of Dallas. Its population stands at more than 26 million people, second only behind California. But what's particularly fascinating is how the makeup of the state is changing. Immigration has played a major role, of course. More than 16% of Texans are foreign-born, and more than 1/3 of them are Hispanic. That's twice the national average. In fact, the number of Hispanics are expected to surpass the number of whites in Texas by 2020. It's already a majority-minority state. Hispanics will make up more than half of the state's total population by 2030. That's got some Republicans sounding the political alarm.
Texas will be a Democrat state within 10 years if you don't change. That means we evolve. Doesn't mean we give up on what we believe in, but it means we have to be a more welcoming party.
But for at least the last 12 years, Democrats have been telling me and others, just wait 4 more years. You'll see the shift. Didn't happen in 2002 when Texas Democrats had an Hispanic nominee for governor, an African American for the U.S. Senate. Democrats pinned their hopes on an independent vote and didn't quite work out. Push for more women in office hasn't done it either right now. It's the Hispanic vote that's fueling Democrats' dreams of a political takeover in Texas. But for now, you got to say, Texas remains solidly in the hands of the GOP. The question is, for how long? I'm joined now by 2 top political Texans and veterans of plenty of political wars, former Republican Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison and former Democratic Congressman from the Fort Worth area, Martin Frost. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Hutchison, let me start with you. You were actually part of this transition. You were your win in that special election to replace Lloyd Bentsen was sort of the precursor to Republican dominance coming that '94 election. When you hear Democrats talk of making Texas competitive again, Do you think it's all talk, or do you think that that there's something that's going to happen soon in Texas?
I do think that the Democrats are going to make significant gains, but not in the near term. I think it will be further out, and I think it's something that Republicans need to look at and be very concerned about, because we've got to stay in the mainstream of the conservative movement, but not go so far out that we lose the independence and the great spirit of Texas, as you pointed out.
You know, Martin, what's interesting is you look at what Texas Democrats are doing this year, and on one hand, Wendy Davis is sparking a lot of national interest, raising a lot of money in the gubernatorial race, and yet you were just telling me the party's still not really a very strong party in the state of Texas if its U.S. Senate nominee is going to end up being a LaRouche.
Well, we hope
it's possible, right? But that's right now. There's this fear. The fact that they have to fight and spend money to prevent a LaRouche from getting their nomination. That's what parties that have no chance in a state have to do.
Well, look, this is a fluke. We didn't get anybody well known to run for the Senate. There's a woman with a short last name. Her name is Keisha Rogers, who was polling first. She's African American. She's a LaRouche. She wants to impeach the president.
Right.
We are working very hard.
Cartels of the Queen Elizabeth and all that stuff.
Yes, the party is working very hard to make sure she's not the nominee. But look at the governor's race. We're going to have the first really well-funded candidate in a long time. She may raise $40 million. I think she's got a shot. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that we can't win if we don't run. We have to, when we have a good candidate, we have to run.
You know, Senator, you sort of just alluded to it a minute ago in one of your answers about the future of the Republicans. And that is, here's a state that demographically, if Democrats do register a lot of these unregistered voters that are Hispanics, you can see numbers-wise, the raw vote totals that can make it more competitive. But just at this moment in time, the Republican Party, it's still a race to the right to get a nomination. You've been a victim of this. You challenged Rick Perry in a primary. He beat you by going right. Even if Texas, the state, still only wants to be center-right. How does the Republican Party deal with this?
Well, first of all, we have reached out to Hispanics for a long time. The Republican Party is friendly to Hispanics, and we have strong Hispanic members of the legislature, members of our county commissioners' courts. We have mayors, and these are Republican Hispanics. So I think really Texas is a model for how you bring in the Hispanic population that is certainly growing. But it's not hostile to the Republican Party here. I carried the Hispanic vote in at least one of my elections, and George W. Bush always got in the 40% range. So we're not the typical problem area for Hispanics that some of the national Republicans have been.
And Martin, that has been the reason why a lot of people say Texas Republicans have hung on a lot longer, frankly, than Florida Republicans, for instance.
Well, I was down in Austin last weekend for a family event, and I turned on television and watched the commercials, and every Republican running for lieutenant governor, every Republican running for attorney general was trying to get to the right of the next one. And the Republican Party is just racing headlong to the far right. They're not going to do well among Hispanics. Senator Hutchinson and President Bush were exceptions. Other statewide candidates have not done well.
Let me ask you this, Martin. Do you believe if the Republican Party were in the mold of Kay Bailey Hutchinson, the Democrats would have a farther way to go?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, Kay was defeated significantly by Rick Perry in the primary. I think Kay was a very good United States Senator. They don't want to be there. That's the problem. They don't want to be Kay Bailey Hutchinson.
And Senator, I mean, that's the challenge here for the Republicans, right?
Well, I think we've got to reach out and make sure we have a majority so that we can continue to govern. And can I give a shout out to Matthew McConaughey, a UT graduate?
Absolutely, a Texan.
A UT graduate.
And Kate Blanchett's father was a Texan.
Oh, there you go. More Texas connection. Kay Bailey Hutchinson, Martin Frost, thank you much.